Alrighty guys, so if you were on my Facebook page, you saw yesterday that I had cut out all of my pieces. So this morning I've interfaced just two pieces. So this is like the collar band, and I've just put a medium woven fusible onto there. And then my collar, because I know my brother likes a nice stiff collar, I've actually put the extra heavy non-woven fusible on that piece, just on one of the two pieces. So that's the only two things I've fused, and everything else is just fabric. Now for this today, I will actually be using a serger or overlocker, depending on where you live, will depend on what you call it. So yeah, if you don't have one, you're going to have to French seam everything, which is relatively easy up until you get to the armholes, and then French seaming is a lot harder. But anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with our back pieces. So that one you would have cut on the fold, and then you've got what's called the yoke, which is like the top back piece, and you need two of these. Now, the pattern comes with measurements and things, but I actually find the way I'm about to do it quicker. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold one of the yoke pieces in half and find the center. And then we're going to do the same to the top of the back of the shirt. So we're going to fold it in half and then clip it right there. Now, if you wanted to do embroidery, you would do the embroidery on this part before you would join everything to the shirt. So now I'm going to open this up. I should probably move the camera so you can see what I'm doing a bit better. All right, so I'm going to have, this is the top edge here, and there's my center. And I'm going to put this piece right sides down like this. Now, your big back piece will be larger than the yoke. And that's meant to be like that because this has got a little pleat in the center. So what I'm going to do is just move along from the outside towards the center and pin it. This is one of the few things I actually pin because I find it easier than actually putting all the measurements on. So I'm just making sure that these are flush until I get to, so here's the center of the yoke. So I just want to get like one pin's length away from that. And then I'm going to come to the other side and join that edge up along here. Now I know that this isn't the traditional way to do it. The way the pattern says is mark out the pleat and then join everything. But I like to do it this way. This is the way I make all the shirts. Because for me, it's easier than marking the pleat. Because if you do the pleat length wrong, you're going to have to adjust it anyway. So this just allows me to do it from the beginning. Okay, so now that I've just got this little gap here, what I want to do is I want to join up the two clipped parts that I made, and I'm just going to push the fabric along until it meets up at the clip. So like there, and then fold it back on itself until it joins back up to the clip. So you're going to have this little extra bit of fabric. Now, I understand that this is probably not the best colored fabric to be doing this with. So if you're struggling with that, I'm struggling to do it over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and pin like 1/4 of an inch each side from the clip on the yoke. And then all I have to do is basically squish this flat down like that and then add it into the pins. So now we've got our little pleat, and I'm going to show you that from the other side. So I've got my little pleat just here. So that's the hardest bit we're going to do. Then we're going to take the other yoke piece and put it right side to wrong side. So we're making a yolk sandwich. So you're going to have the wrong side and the wrong side each side of the back piece. Now, if you wanted to add a tag to your shirt, if you've got like fabric tags, you could add it in now where those pleats join. That's where you'd add the tag in between these two pieces. So it will be on the inside down towards the yoke. Or you could put it up at the collar if you forget to do it at the yoke. I don't have any fabric tags left. Otherwise I would put some in. I could possibly get some, but I don't really make clothing for other people, so I don't necessarily need them. I'm definitely not selling clothes. If you're selling clothes, you have to have tags. All right, so now all of those pieces are joined into there. So I'm going to stitch this together. Now, the clothing patterns, as a general rule, come with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, because I put the pins in the way I have, I can actually just stitch straight over them all, which is lovely. But I tend to not to go full speed because I don't want to snap anything. I already played that game today. When setting up my overlocker, I snapped the needle changing colors, and then I found out that the tiny, tiny little screw has been threaded, so I couldn't do anything. So this is now what it looks like. So from the outside, you've got your yoke, and then you've got the little pleat here. And then from the inside, if you lift this up, you've got the right side facing up the top here as well. So now what we're going to do at the shoulder pieces at the top, we're going to take our front two pieces and we're going to join them onto the shoulders. So the best way to do that is have this piece right side up with the back, and then you want to put the join in the middle. So basically the shirt's inside out. And then we're going to stitch along the top of these. So I'm not going to pin this because I have made this shirt so many times. I've made myself like, I don't know, 5 or 6 of these. I've made my friends a couple. I've made hubby some. And my brother gets one of these every year. So I no longer need to pin that. But if you are new to sewing in general or clothing, perhaps a couple of pins wouldn't hurt just to hold it in place. So now I'm going to do the other one. We're going to back stitch at the start and the end of everything that we're doing. And then we're going to trim off those tails. So now you should have something that looks ridiculously huge like this. And this is what we want. So we're going to lay this flat with the parts we just sewed on facing up. And we're going to go to the bottom and just fold it halfway up and then roll this, but without catching the back yoke piece. So now that I've got this like sausage in the middle, I'm going to bring the yoke over and we're going to make a yoke burrito. So we've rolled it up so it sits out like this. So this is the shirt, and then these are the two yokes, and we're putting those right sides together. And then we're going to stitch along here as well. And I know this seems insane, but you just have to trust me. This is how we do the whole top section without any seams. So I'm just now stitching one stitch further in from the last lot when I attach the shoulders. Just one stitch over so that we're not going to see the first stitches we did. You could also baste it really, really close to the edge if you wanted to as well. So again, line it up. Feel free to use pins to hold everything into place. But like I said, I've done this a lot. So then we're going to back stitch and then pull that out. So now that we've got our burrito, yoke burrito, I'm just going to pull the sausage part out through one of the armholes on the side. It doesn't matter which one. So we're just pulling it out. And then, just like magic, we now have the yoke completely attached with no seam showing in either the inside or the outside. So none of that requires any kind of overlocking. So that's what we've got so far. So now we're going to stitch down this part here. So we're going to put them right sides together, and I'm going to stitch this side seam on both sides. Now this is the part that's going to need overlocking. So if you don't have an overlocker or a zigzag stitch or an overlocking stitch on your machine, we're going to French seam them. So I have shown that in other clothing videos that I've done. So if you don't know what a French seam is, go look at some of the other clothing videos. I'm going to make a playlist of everything clothing related so you guys can find it easy. But basically you sew right sides together at 1/4 inch, trim off the excess, and then fold it the other way and sew another 1/4 inch. So that the raw edge is encased inside. And then we're going to backstitch. And then we're going to pull that out and trim the tails. If we remember to trim these as we go, it's just going to make everything that little bit neater. So now I'm going to come to the other armhole and do down the other side. So I always like to go top to bottom because if I've cut it wrong, if one's too long, I can adjust it at the bottom, and it's going to be easier than trying to adjust a dodgy seam under the arm. That's just my personal preference. So again, I'm just stitching down, and you should definitely pin this if you've never made clothes, because it's just going to help. Okay, so we need to overlock those, but before I get up and move to the overlocker, we're kind of going to stitch as much as we can at the same time so that I don't have to keep getting up and down, because that's what's going to make this difficult. So now what we want is our sleeves. Now this is a short sleeve shirt. So these are what the sleeves look like. So we're just going to put right sides together and then stitch this really small edge here. If this was a long sleeve, this would obviously be longer. So you just want to line up the fabric. And then again, right sides together. And then pop this under. And I'm just going to chain sew these because they're quick and easy to do so. Trim off all the tails and separate them. So now I'm going to adjust, and we're going to go over to the overlocker and we're going to overlock these. So I'm going to show you that. Okay, so this is my industrial overlocker. It's technically a 5-thread overlocker, so it can stitch a line and overlock at the same time, but I find that the stitch is not super strong, so I don't do it. So this one's got a motor, so it's probably going to be a bit loud, but here we go. So I've got a foot pedal to lift my foot up, so now I just want to slide this under and overlock along that edge. And I can chain sew these. So what this is doing is this is going to finish the edge so that the shirt is machine washable and won't fray down the edge. Now I've put in green and black thread because I don't have enough of all black or all green, but because they're very dark colors, you can't really see them anyway. And you're always going to have a tail. So with overlockers, it's not like a sewing machine. You must always leave a tail. So this is actually got like a braid going on, basically. Okay, so we're going to come to the other arm. And I always run my hand along here to make sure that nothing has kind of tucked under, because this part here is a cutter. So if you've got it all kind of convoluted and mixed up, you're likely to cut a hole in your garment. This is not me trying to deter you from getting one, it's just a warning from experience. So I keep my hand here and I'm making sure that this is all nice and smooth at my finger. So if it's smooth on my finger, it means nothing's tucked up and I'm not going to stitch a hole. Trim off the tails. And so now we can go back to the sewing machine. Alright, so now that we've overlocked, we are going to attach our sleeves. So before I attach the sleeves, I'm actually going to hem the bottom of this. Now, I could have overlocked around here. So you could just overlock the sleeve and then turn it up. But I'm going to turn it up twice. So I'm going to fold it over and then over again, which is basically a rolled hem, but a thick one. So if you're new to this, you could definitely iron this to make it easier to do. And then I'm going to start at the underarm seam so that I'm not going to see the join. And then I'm going to come along in sections and fold it and then stitch it. So what I want to do is I want to stitch close to the top edge, not the bottom edge. If I stitch close to the bottom edge, what's going to happen is that this end will then flap down and become visible, which is what we don't want. So you want to try and stitch as close to the top edge as you can while it also still looks neat. You could also iron this in place, or you could pin it if you wanted to. So I'm just working my way around the sleeve, tucking under the raw edge, and then sewing. You could also use a roll hem foot. I only have a really skinny roll hem foot, and I want my sleeve to have the stitching a little bit higher. So that's why I'm not using that, but I will be using my roll hem foot on the bottom of this shirt because I just will be. Alright, so now if we turn that out, that's one sleeve nicely hemmed. You could go along and do a second stitch if you wanted to make it fancy and decorative, but if you were going to do that, you'd want to be putting like a contrast thread in for the stitching. Whereas I've just chosen black so that it's pretty well hidden. I could have also done like a bright lime green would be nice, a red, a blue. I did nearly do blue, but I went with black because I feel like the shirt's probably loud enough without adding more. Alright, so again, we're going to back stitch and then fold this up. Always stop with the needle down, so it's going to hold the shirt in place while we adjust the rest, if you're going to do it this way. Although you should always stop with the needle down anyway, just so nothing shifts on you. So I'm just folding it over twice. Now, please remember I've had a lot of practice at this. And I know I'm probably gonna, have some people that are telling me I'm doing it wrong. I didn't say that this is the proper way or the only way. It's just the way I make shirts. And I don't like having the overlocking on a sleeve because I don't want it to ever become itchy and irritating. So by double folding it under like this, it's as smooth as possible. And then at the end of the shirt, I'm going to give it a good iron, so that'll really press that nice and flat and crisp. But I don't need to do it right now. So I'm going to turn my sleeves right way out. And then we're going to come to a sleeve hole. Now I'll pin one to show you what I'm doing. So I'm going to take this seam and the bottom part of the shirt sleeve seam, and I'm going to mash them so that they are perfectly lined up, and I'm going to put 2 pins in, one on either side of that seam. And this is fabric is right sides together because I'm going to overlock this. because I don't think I could French seam a pocket. I don't think I have that skill. Okay, so now what we're going to do is what's called easing the seam in. So the first thing I want to do is find the halfway point of the sleeve. And I want to find the halfway point of the sleeve hole. Probably should have done this when it's not attached, but I never do. So it won't be in the center of the yoke because the yoke's more on the back than the front. So I've just got a little clip, and then I'm going to match those two up. And so now all of the fabric I have left has to fit into the spaces provided on each side. Now it's always going to seem like one is bigger than the other, but in bag making and in clothing, we need to hold it so it's a 3D object. So as you can see there's a lot more sleeve than sleeve hole. So I'm going to come under the sleeve, and I've got the sleeve side up, and so the shirt is under the bottom. And I'm just going to start at that seam and stitch and back stitch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of grab it with my hands around and bend it. And I know this looks awkward, but I'm going to bend it into a 3D object that is the circle of a sleeve. And so what's going to happen is you're going to find that the fabric will suddenly fit much, much better because I'm holding it like the 3D object it was designed to be. If it didn't have this much fabric, the shirt wouldn't fit. So now I'm at the top. I'm going to flip this over, flip all the shirt so you're not fighting the weight. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. So I'm going to hold it. I know my hands get really awkward, but this is the easiest way that I've found to do sleeves where I don't have to do a million pins. So I'm holding it in like a complete C curve. And then I'm just bringing it around and down. And then with the last bit, we'll do the same thing. And then I'm back to the start. So I'm going to back stitch and pull that out. So this takes practice. So if you're ever making a shirt and you do that and it doesn't work, I promise I have made a lot of shirts where I've always got excess and I pucker it at the top because I didn't know what I was doing. And I used to try and hold everything flat, but it's a sleeve and a shoulder and your shoulder is round. So if you do it that way, you'll find that your seam, you can't really see it. I've picked the wrong fabric for a video, but anyway, it's perfectly round now. So again, practice makes perfect. Even at the top, we've got a nice smooth seam everywhere. So that is now the shirt. So technically I could put this shirt on. It doesn't fit me because it's not my size, but we've got a sleeve. So now we're going to do the same to the other side. So always have your sleeve turned the right way out because it's just easier. And then again, I'm going to start at the underarm seam and I'm going to join those two together. Now some patterns have a left and a right shirt, so they've got different kind of cuts on each side. So just make sure whatever pattern you're using, you check these things to make sure you're not putting your sleeve on backwards, because that won't work out for you. So again, I'm going to put 2 pins here. And yes, every time I clip it once I've already attached it. It's one of those things that, I don't know, I'm just in the habit of doing it now, but maybe match up your edges and find the center before you attach it. Not that it makes much of a difference. There's my center on the shirt, and then I just need to find my center on the sleeve. Now some patterns will actually have like the top shoulder seam marked on like the sleeve and your pattern piece. If your pattern has that, just make sure you transfer that like I'm doing now. So wherever they say to put the mark, just do a little clip so that you get a triangle so that you can match it up, because that will definitely help. All right, so that is now attached. So I'm going to turn the shirt inside out so that the sleeve is going to be inside the hole, not outside the hole. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to match up my top clipped section because that's where it needs to match up. And I'm going to stick 2 pins. Also with this, you want to make sure with the yoke's going to be like the 2 pieces. You want to make sure you're going to capture all of them. If you're worried that you're going to miss them, do a basting stitch along the edge to join it as one piece, and then you won't be so worried. All right, so again, I'm going to have sleeve up, shirt underneath, and I want to start at the underarm seam. I always start at the underarm seam. It's my thing. So we're going to back stitch. We're going to do a couple of stitches. And then I'm going to adjust this. So I'm going to work my way around. And I'm pushing back to make the 3D object. This does take some practice. I know I just said it, but I'm going to say it again because I don't want people to be deterred because it doesn't necessarily work out the first time. Also, pin. If you're concerned that you can't do it this way, pin. Add more pins because you can always maneuver the pins to work the excess around the sleeve before you stitch it. I've just grown accustomed to no longer using pins. That's time and practice. But I do like the way I put in sleeves. I got taught this by a guy that went to like fashion school in Melbourne. He's the one that taught me the trick because I was always having issues having like puckers and things. And so this is what he taught me to do. So now I'm teaching you. And then we're going to get back to the start and we're going to backstitch. So I can overlock that at the very end if I want to. It's no longer going to be in my way of any description. So I'm going to overlock that at the end. So now we're starting to get a shirt. Technically you've got a shirt with no collar. So what I want to do now is I want to hem the bottom of the shirt. So again, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can overlock it and then turn it up, or you can use a roll hem foot, or you can manually roll hem it like I did with the sleeve edge. But because this is a curve, it's very curvy, because it's one of those shirts that curves around your hip, I want to be using my roll hem foot. Turns out I already had it handy, which is awesome. And I don't actually have a screwdriver for my sewing machine. I use a bobbin. I got taught this by another lady. She's like, it's so much better because you've always got a bobbin lying around. And she was right. I don't do it with aluminium bobbins though, only steel ones, because I had an aluminium one and turning this wrecks them. I also didn't like that bobbin to begin with, so it wasn't a huge deal. But if you're going to do it, use steel ones. So then I'm going to just put my threads behind like that, foot back down, and now we're ready to roll hem. So I'm going to have the fabric wrong side up, and I'm obviously going to start at the end, and I'm just going to go the whole way along. So the first thing we want to take note of is which way this seam has been sewed into the shirt, because we want this to go the same way so that we're not going to have a twist under the shirt. So I'm going to pin that. Obviously I can't run over that pin, but it's just going to help remind me which way they need to sit when I get up to them. So again, this one, I'm going to push it to the way it needs to sit and then pin it there. You also notice I'm not pushing the pins all the way in. I want them to stick out because I need to notice them. Alright, so to start a roll hem, you actually just have to do it yourself. So I'm going to fold it over in half and then in half again. And that's how you start it to get underneath. So I'm going to stitch forward a couple of stitches and then back to lock it all in. And then from here, the easiest way to do it is I just lift this fabric up like this, and you'll find that the fabric will work its way into the curve all by itself. And then I'm just going to slowly go along. And the reason I'm not going too fast is because I don't want it to miss. I want to have a nice curve, and I don't want to go so fast that the fabric comes out of the roll hem, because I have done that before. I'm teaching you all the things not to do because I've already tried it and failed. So the other thing that you may have a little bit of issue is when we get to the seam, because it is a bit thicker than the single bit of fabric, and because my roll hem foot is so small, sometimes it doesn't want to put all that fabric in. So I'm going to gently tug on it just to make sure it's going to go through like that. Then once I get past it, I can not pull on it anymore. You can go a little bit faster if you're feeling it. I'm quite happy to go slow. I'm not in a hurry. I mean, I am. I've got a lot to do, but I'm also not in a hurry. So it's fine. If this was straight, I would definitely be going a lot faster. But this whole thing is just like a curve like this. So I'm not in a hurry. I don't want to wreck it. I prefer to go slower and get it done properly. And I know a lot of you are looking at this going, oh my god, that's still so fast. But compared to my normal sewing speed, this is like a quarter of it. So I'm just using this hand, and I'm literally holding it like this to just hold the fabric. So I'm using this finger to push it so that the fabric's up, so that it feeds into the roll hem foot easily. I'm not pulling on it, I'm just guiding it. If you pull on it, you're going to get that lettuce hem where it won't sit flat. This may not look like it'll sit flat, but once I iron it, it will. So then again, we're going to backstitch. And I already trimmed my tails. Look at me go. Right, so at the end when we press that, that's going to look lovely. I know it doesn't right now, but again, hasn't been pressed. So the next thing we're going to do is the front edging. I think it's called a placard, maybe. I don't know. So I do these differently to patterns, and I'm sure some of you are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. What I have done is I have basically turned it into double fold bias. So I folded it in half, and then I folded each side into the center so that I can just stitch it on once instead of stitching it and then folding it around and stitching it again. You don't have to do it this way. The pattern does tell you how to do it a different way, but this is the way I do it. So I have pre-ironed those. I steam press them to make sure they're just going to stay. And so now I'm going to go to the bottom, and I'm going to fold it right sides together and then stitch along that bottom edge. Now it's, oh, actually, no, first I'm going to change my foot over, because roll hem feet do not like doing normal sewing. So I don't have to be on my Teflon foot. It's just now a habit. I could put one of my metal feet in, of which I do have a lot. The standard foot that it actually came with is quite wide and metally. So that's the foot that my machine came with. So it would potentially make sense to put that on. But I've put the Teflon foot on now, so we're done. I've made peace with that. Alright, so fold it right sides together, and we're going to stitch the bottom of this closed. Backstitch, and then stitch down like that. And I'm going to chain stitch it and do the other one as well. like that. And then I'm going to trim off a lot of the excess fabric here so that it's going to sit nice. So I'm going to trim off that corner and that corner so that it sits nice and flat for me. Because I've already finished the end of the shirt, so now when I push that through, the bottom is sealed, and because I took away all of that bulk, now this will fold back in like so without being super bulky on the end. So I've got no raw edges on that edge at all, and it's not super chunky at the end. If you want to, you can go and hit this with a shot of steam just to help extra flatten it down. But I'm pretty happy with where that's at. Okay, so now I just want to pick which side I like most of this. So I like that side on that one, and this one's pretty good on both. So I'm going to work with the one that I only like one side of to make sure I put it on the right side of the shirt. So I'm going to take the shirt, and I'm just going to, from the bottom, because the bottom's the bit that we've finished, I'm just going to tuck that in like so, and then you can either pin it or peg it down. You just want to make sure that that edge is right at that edge. And this is the part where the buttons are going to attach to. And the reason that we've double folded it is because it gives more stability when we put the buttons on. So I'm just going to move along. Again, you can use the Wonder Clips or you can use pins. If you're a clothes maker, you've probably only got pins, which is totally fine. And the reason I'm clipping it is because what I want to do is I want to start from the top so that we're not going to see any of my back stitching. And I want to stitch down, across and up 1/8 of an inch from the edge of this. So I'm just working my way up. Use as many or as few pins or clips as you like. It's just to hold it in place. Now again, the pattern says to stitch this wrong side on and then bend it round and then tuck it in and top stitch it. I like my way. You don't have to do my way. It's not necessarily better, it's just better for me. All right. Cool. So now that that's clipped on where I want it and I'm happy, you want to make sure that you're happy with it because once we start stitching, that's the end of that. So, again, if you're doing, this would look really fun in a contrast color if you're doing like a plain shirt. So if you've picked like a plain navy, you could do all your stitching in white, which would look really pretty. Especially if you've done a long sleeve shirt, because then you could do the stitching and the cuff and collar in the same colors and make it like a fun accent. But I'm not doing that because the shirt's busy enough. And so then as I get to the clips, I'm just going to take them off. One more stitch, pivot with the needle down, go across the bottom. And then I'm going to move all of this out of the way because the shirt bulk is now going to be in the throat section. And then I'm going to stitch 1/8 of an inch up the other side. Again, there's no hurry. This is top stitching, so you're going to see it and notice it no matter what color it is. You kind of want to make it nice, I guess. Needle down, and then I'm just going to reposition the shirt a little bit. Now buttons are going to be the last thing I do because I need my other machine, so I'm going to have to set it up somewhere. I don't know where yet. Haven't quite decided. Alright, get to the top, back stitch, and then pull it out. So we're over halfway for anyone that's interested. And now we've got this nice placard edge. I did contemplate doing these in red because I thought it would be really nice, but reds are really, really hard to match. So I didn't. Alright, so now we're going to do the other one. So we're going to do it in the same fashion. We're going to start at the bottom and work our way up because the birds show on both sides of these ones. This is why I didn't care as much about this. You may also want to think about that. So if you're doing a plain shirt and having crazy accents, just think about the bird placement on, or that, you know, the picture placement when you're doing these parts. Because it can make like a huge difference depending on how you're doing the shirt and how big the print is as well. So this print is very busy, but the birds are fairly far apart, whereas the Christmas fabric I've got with the cats are very kind of on top of each other. So it's going to matter a lot less about me and my placement for those because it is such a busy, smaller print. So again, we're just slipping that up into there and clipping it down. You could also pin. So I've got to make another one of these shirts. It might end up being a live so that you can all chat to me. Or actually I might be doing hubby some shorts. I'm not sure yet. I haven't quite decided what I want to do for the Christmas set that we'll be wearing this year. Okay, so this time I still want to start from the top. So this time I'm going to start from the inside edge with all of the shirt shoved into here. So depending on where you've put your clips, you may not have to take them off yet. I mean, you still could if you wanted to. And then needle down and pivot and do the small base like that. Pivot up. And just pull the pegs off as we go. There we go. So now all we need to do is add our collar and our buttons. So let's grab the collar pieces. I'm just going to pop the shirt aside. So I'm going to start with the actual collar. Now I've got mine going this way so that the birds are facing the right way. And I'm just going to do right sides together and I'm going to sew down around that curve and back down the other end. And I'm going to leave the top bit open. Back stitch, stop, needle down and pivot. And then just follow the curve around. Needle down, pivot down, and back stitch. And yes, mine's a little bit uneven, but there's a good chance I cut it that way. And then I'm just going to chop off the excess here, like that. And then also this corner. And this is going to give us a pointier collar. And I'm also going to take off some of the bulk at this edge here, like that. So now we just need to turn it inside out, and I'm going to go and press this on the iron. So I'm going to put my finger in the corner as much as I can, pinch it with my nail, and then push that through. Do that with both the corners. And then I'm going to grab my stiletto, or sewing awl, depending on where you live is what you call it. And I'm just going to flick out these points so that they're extra super pointy. You don't want dull points. It won't look awesome. Why make a shirt? Why go to all the effort to make a shirt if it's not going to be awesome? So I'm just going to I'm putting the stiletto in and then kind of easing it out sideways like this. I don't want to do it too fast because I don't want to pull any stitches or raw fabric through. So now I've got a nice pointy point. So I'm just going to hit pause and I'm going to go and iron this so it's perfectly flat. And I'm going to shoot it with some steam to make sure it's really going to stay nice and crispy. Okay, so that is steamed press nice and flat now. So now I'm going to top stitch. Just 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So this is going to help with future ironing because it's now going to hold everything flat. And again, if you're doing it in a contrasting color, this is a nice little detail that you can add to a shirt. I know a lot of people don't necessarily want to top stitch the collar, and that's fine. You can definitely skip this step, but I'm obviously going to do it because I like to. Okay, so that's that done. So now I want to fold it in half and find the center, and then I'm going to clip it. And then I'm going to take one of my collar, I don't remember what this bit's called. That's the collar, and then this is like the collar cuff, I think. So curvy side up like this. On this top edge, I'm also going to clip the center. Actually, I could do it to both because I'm going to need to find the bottom later anyway. So clip both centers. And then I'm going to open this up and I'm going to match my two centers together like that. So now what we need to do is I'm just going to put one pin there, and then I'm going to do what I know I hate doing. And I'm going to take the other one and I'm going to sandwich the collar piece that we just stitched in between everything. And I'm going to pin all the way along and add this piece into that curve. So I'm just going to, and this is going to take me ages because I'm not good at pinning 3 items at the same time, but that's okay. We can't all be awesome at everything all the time. All we can do is try. So I'm lining up all 3 pieces and then adding some pins. I'm using pins, not clips, because I want to be able to sew over them without pulling them out. Which I also could have done for that placard edgy bit. My brother also wants a pocket, but I'm going to put the pocket on at the end. I could have also done that as the first step, which probably would have been easier, but whatever. So I'm just bringing this around the curve and adding pins. And you'll notice that my pins aren't too far apart because that curves one way and this is curving the other. But we want to make sure that all the edges line up. So that requires more pins than normal. That's all. We also want to, I'm just going to come down and pin this edge together. So this edge over here will just have the collar cuff. It won't have the collar in that bit. The collar stops here. So this last little curve won't have any collar in it, but we still want to pin it together so it doesn't shift while we're stitching. Okay, so then we're going to come back to the center and we're going to go the other way. There's a piece of blue thread here that's really starting to annoy me. It's also stuck in. Oh, that's why. So that's what I used to sew up my child's hat, and I just didn't take the thread off. So I'm going to do that now because it's annoying me. Maybe not. That's better. Just chop the excess off. And now I'll also still be able to find the hand sewing needle when I need it. So, line up all three. Pop that in like that. So this time right here that I'm spending pinning this is why I've learnt to pin, like to sew most things without the pins, because otherwise it just does take a little bit longer. But it also took a lot of practice to not use pins. So I actually slowly like weaned myself off pins. So I used to do heaps, which were a lot closer than this so that nothing would shift, which is nothing wrong with that because I was learning and I was teaching myself. And then my pins got this wider, and then on things like the side, I just put, 7 pins, and then 5 pins, and then 3 pins, and then I went, I don't need them. So I used to line up like the top, bottom, and center to make sure that everything would still line up. But over time, I don't need them anymore. Except on this, because it's two curves going in opposite directions and I want them to go in the same direction so I can stitch them. So it probably doesn't really matter which side, right side's up, but I'm going to put the side that hasn't got the interfacing right sides down so that the feed dogs like move it through nicely. And then we're just going to back stitch and stitch around the curve. So I'm not going too fast because I do have a lot of pins. And going full speed will sometimes snap a needle, which I don't feel like doing today. I've already done 1 needle and that was more than enough. So that noise that you could just hear was the needle hitting the pin and then rolling off it because of the way I put the pins in. And I know a lot of people don't like to go over pins and they have a lot of personal horror stories, but I very rarely, if ever, snap a pin, and it's only if I'm going like full speed. So I'm happy to sew over them, but that doesn't mean that you have to. Feel free to pull them out as you go. Okay, so that is now, look on this side because you can see better. That's now nice and stitched. So what I want to do is I want to just come along these curves and cut out some of the bulk. Like that. And then again, I'm going to go back to the iron and I want to iron that down nice and flat. So you should have some nice curves going on at the edges, and this is now what we've got. So that will go around the neck like this, and there'll be a button there, and then you can fold this bit down and there's your collar. But I do need to iron it because sewing good clothing requires a lot of ironing. So I just don't turn my iron off while I'm making these. So I will be back after I've ironed it. Okay, so as you can see, ironed looks lovely. So now we just need to attach it to the shirt. So the first thing I'm going to do is go between like the yoke neck, join those two together to find the center. You can do it all the way along, but it's the same outcome. So I've just clipped my center, and you'll notice that I'm doing very small clips because I need to make sure the clips are within the seam allowance. Otherwise, you're going to see them. So then I'm going to take the side that I've interfaced and attach it to the outside, which is also the side where I found the center clip. So I've clipped the center here and here, And then I'm going to line that up. Now you can put as many or as few like pins in as you like. Mine are going to be relatively far apart, but I am still going to do some because this is an important edge to attach. So I'm only attaching one side of the collar cuff. I really hope that's what it's called. Otherwise I sound like I'm a crazy person. And you'll always notice that I have the pin heads sticking out towards the throat of the machine, and I never push the pin all the way in. I like to have them out so that they're easy to grab and the head's not going to get stuck in the sewing machine, because these things are important to not happen. All right. Then I'm going to match up that edge with the join here. Put a pin. And again, we want to make sure that we are not pinning the other side of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to stitch this and then fold this over, tuck under the raw edge and finish up the seam. So I just have to work my way along and add pins as needed, like that. And then I'm going to come and do the same to the other side. So add some pins as I work around. And again, you can definitely use more than this. You could use no pins, although I don't recommend that for this. Some things are fine not to pin, and some things I think require pins. And as many of these shirts as I've made, I still refuse to not pin this. Because I want it to sit nice. Okay, so that's enough pins now. So now I'm just going to stitch from one side to the other, and I'm going to have this part on top so that I can pull it out of the way and make sure I'm not going to stitch it. I also don't need my scissors anymore. So I'm going to start at this edge here, and we're still doing the same seam allowance. And you also want to make sure that the shirt isn't creeping up into this seam as well. If you've pinned this, it's not as difficult. And some patterns actually have the collar cuff and the collar as one piece. So you've got kind of less steps to do. I'm pretty sure my little kid's shirt has it just as one piece instead of two. All right, and then backstitch when we get to there. And then come along and pull all of the pins out. Oops. All right, so then you just want to check it, make sure you haven't missed anywhere. And then we're going to put the shirt so it's facing the inside, and you can start from anywhere. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is push this up and then place this down. So because we've already ironed it, it's going to sit beautifully flat. And then I just tuck with my thumbs that raw edge under and pin it down. So I'm going to come again. I'm going to smooth it down from the top, push it up and tuck it under so that no raw edges will be showing. So if you didn't put your tag here, you would then put your tag up here if you wanted to use a tag. So again, smooth it down from the top and then tuck the excess under. And you also want to make sure that nothing behind is getting tucked up into this as well. Tuck it up and under. And again, up and under. See this tail I didn't chop off earlier? I am going to chop it off now because I don't want it poking out of this. So I didn't actually start from the very center, but it also doesn't matter where you start from. You can start left to right or work your way out. It's a personal preference. But what I am going to do is, before I do this corner, is I'm just going to chop off this little excess bit of fabric so that it's going to tuck smoother, because it's not playing ball. So I just want to cut out the excess like that. And so now when I smooth that down, there's no giant lump there, which is nice. It's going to sit nice and flat for me. Look at that. Beautiful. You'll also notice I'm putting the pins in and then up. If you try and put them the other way, it's not going to hold this little flap in place. So you need to go into the edge and then away from it that way. So if we put a pin in this way, it's just not going to hold. You need to trust me on this. I learned from experience. So I've got the pins fairly close because I don't want anything to shift. Now before I go ahead and do the other side, I'm just going to chop off this edge as well. So just the raw edge to make this corner sit better. And then pop it in the bin. And then come back and lie it down flat and then tuck under that edge. If there's a faster way of doing this, I have not yet learnt it. But the way I do it, I know it looks neat, so I'm happy to do this. So again, we're smoothing it from the top and then tucking it under. So we're getting there. I'm nearly through. And so then you have two options. You can just stitch this bottom, or you can stitch the whole way around that. I'm going to stitch the whole way around just because I want to, not because I have to. And again, decorative stitching on solid colors. Also, less ironing for my brother. More things that are stitched in place, the less ironing he's going to have to do to get them to sit there. Ow. Try not to stab yourself with the pins like I just did. Alright, last pin. Excellent. Alright, so I'm going to do where the pins are first because I don't want to get stabbed. So I'm actually going to start from this end, right here. I'm going to do 2 stitches forward, 1 back, and then I'm just going to stitch right along that edge. And I'm pulling the shirt like this to make sure that nothing's getting tucked underneath the stitches, because then you'll have to unpick. So slowly but surely, like that. And then I'm going to come across and pull all of these pins out so I don't stab myself on the way back up the other way. So I could just stop there and just stitch that little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you hate top stitching, that's where you would stop. But I'm going to stitch the whole thing. Shift all that out of the way. Besides, this bit doesn't really move, so it's actually the easiest part. The bit we did first was the difficult bit. But we start with that so that we can get the pins out of the way. Alright, pull that out. Now, if you're not adding a pocket, technically your shirt's done and all you need is buttons. And if you're too scared of buttons, you could always do press studs. But that is like a fun shirt. So now I'm going to go and get the pocket because I actually need the front piece to be able to place the pocket and also to be able to place the buttons. So I'm going to go get all of that and then I will stitch the pocket on and then we can do buttons with my other machine. So I've got my pocket piece. So the first thing I did was I overlocked all the edges and then I have double folded down this raw edge. So I ironed it in half and in half. And so I'm going to top stitch across there. And then I've also just ironed all of these edges in because it's going to make it easier when I'm trying to pin it to the shirt. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to do it from this way, and I'm going to stitch along the top edge to set the edge of the pocket. Cross like that and back stitch. We always back stitch. So that's now the top of the pocket. Now again, if you wanted to, you could do more decorative stitching there. Entirely up to you. So this is my front piece. I have marked the placement of the pocket and I've also checked how far apart the buttons are, and the buttons are 3 3/4 inches. Also, it has told me. So what I want to do is I've got my shirt nice and flat here and I just want to put this up against it, but remembering that I have taken off a little bit of the seams. So keeping that in mind, this is just going to help me with my pocket placement. There's my armhole. And this placard is actually at the edge, so that's easier. And so then I'm just going to take 2 pins and mark where the pocket's going to go. Now, again, I probably should have done this at the start, but I didn't. And this is also a really good way to add pockets to shirts you already own. If you buy like a cheap plain shirt, you can jazz it up by adding like a fun pocket. It's like an easy way to jazz up any costume or, outfit of where you're going. So, with that in mind, I'm going to tuck under these edges that I have already ironed under and place my pocket and then pin all the way around all of the edges. And I'm putting my hand behind because we obviously don't want to pin it to the back because I need to be able to get into it. So now that that top is placed, I can actually come across to the side like this. I know you can't really necessarily see, but I'm trying to be as descriptive as possible. So I'm going to start pinning down the sides. Not that pin, it's bent. So again, I'm actually going to go in, out, and then in again with the pin. That's going to hold it super flat for me. So up, down, or down, up, down. And I'm just working my way down that side of the pocket, and then I'm going to come and do the same to the other side. So down, up, down. You just get a better hold, in my opinion, with the down, up, down of the pins. So instead of just stabbing it through twice, that third one really helps to hold everything in place. So then I'm going to twist it and I'm going to do the base. Now I'll be doing 2 lines of stitching around this pocket because I anticipate my brother is going to be quite rough on the pocket and fill it with things often. So the 2 lines of stitching are going to give it extra stability so that he can do that without it coming off. And then we just tuck in that corner. So at the corners or curves, depending on what shape your pocket is for your pattern, you might need to put in a few extra pins than you have for the sides. But I really don't want this to shift, so that's why I'm using so many pins. But please don't think that you have to use this many. want it to sit exactly where I want it to sit. And so the more pins I've got, the more likely it is to not shift. And this isn't a perfectly square pocket, so the edges are a little bit rounded at the bottom. So again, I just want them to stay as well. So I'm gonna bring my needle up so I can get my project in. And so then I'm just gonna stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And then I'll come in and do another stitch 1/8 of an inch from this stitch. And so the second pass will be quicker because I've already got everything, you know, sewn down. The second one's more decorative, but I'm just going slowly because of the curves and because the pins are still in. And I'm shifting the whole shirt around as I go. And then I'm going to back stitch. And then I'm going to pull out all the pins. And instead of cutting it off and then going around again, I'm actually going to just pivot, move up, forward, back, forward. So basically like I was back stitching, and then around again. Like so. And just do that second line of stitching around. Then I'm going to get to the top, and the same as I did to the other side, I'm going to stitch and then back stitch and then stitch so that everything's symmetrical. And that's also going to reinforce that top of the pocket. So there you go, now we have a pocket. So all that's left to do now is the buttons. So I need to get my other machine for that. So give me a minute. Alrighty, so I've set up my machine kind of, but I thought I should show you where I'm going to put all of my buttonholes. Now I know for a fact that my brother will never use that top one, so I'm going to put my first one here, just below it. And I'm just going to use my Chaco pen to mark it. Now I have checked my pattern, and my pattern says to do 3 3/4 of an inch between each buttonhole. So I'm just going to put vertical lines across like this where the buttons need to go. The reason I'm doing such a big line is A, it's erasable, and B, I don't have to worry about centering the line at the moment. I can just draw the whole line and center it when I get to it. So I'm just working my way down. And then you don't do one for this last little bit. I do know that. Right. So that is where my buttons are going to go. Now, this is a one-step buttonhole machine. This is why I got this. So this is actually the buttonhole foot. Now people look at this and get like really scared about it, but it's really quite simple to use. So this bit here adjusts the buttonhole. So all you do is you take your button and you put it in the back like this. And so now this space that's going to happen is going to make the perfect size buttonhole for your button. So now that I've got the button in, I'm just going to click that in, and then you pull down this bit, which is for buttons. And mine, because it's manual, you have to push it. And it's always going to go, pretty sure it goes backwards first, but because I can't remember, I'm actually going to just grab a scrap of fabric and I'm going to check. So what you do is it's got little red dots on the foot, which I was kind of hoping you could see from this side. That's why I've brought you around. So we're going to click it down and we have to push that back and set it to number 1 for the one-step buttonhole. And then I need to put my pedal down here so I can push it. And this is going to show me what the buttonhole is going to do. So it's going to go backwards first, sew the end, and then come back up the front. So that's good to know. I can now see what's going to happen. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease this so that we get a shorter stitch length. That's also on the wrong thing. I think my child's been playing with all of my dials over here. So I want a small zipper, zigzag. So then we're going to try that again. So we're going to push that back, put this in, and then stitch. So now I get a smaller zigzag closer together, so that's going to make for a better buttonhole. And then it gets back to the start. So now that I'm happy with that, you should always test, guys, because I didn't notice that my child had messed with all the dials. Always test the buttonhole. So now that I'm happy with that, I am going to do my first buttonhole. So this side, so I'm going to push that. And then this line here, I want to line up with the 2 red dots, like so. And I just put the foot in the center of the placard. I really hope I'm calling that the right thing, or I sound crazy. All right, so I've pushed that back, so off we go. So down it goes. We've got a nice close little zigzag. And then it gets to the end and then comes back up the other side. Like so. And then we're done. Pull it out. Trim off the tails. I might even make my zigzag a little bit wider. And then we're going to come down and do the same thing. So I have to push this back. That's it, hole one. Here's the next one. So there. So I'm lining up again those red lines with the chalk line that I did, and then just making sure that the foot is centered on the placard. Oh, and I just lost my thread because I didn't have a long enough tail. Turns out I do it on this machine as well. Although it had to happen at least once in this video because it didn't happen earlier. Anyway. So I'm going to do one more on camera, and then I'm going to turn it off and do the rest, because it's literally the same thing over and over and over. And then I will show you how I open my buttonholes, and I'll stitch on one button for the camera as well, just in case you've never stitched a button on. Alright, down we go. And then what happens is this thing hits over here, so that it can't go any further, and it tells the machine to go back up in the other direction. Like that. You probably can't see it because it's black, but look, a buttonhole. So then you can just trim off the tails. You can actually do this at the end because there's so many to do. And the back color I'm actually using is just maroon. You don't have to change it. It's just I already had a bobbin wound in that color. So I was like, why not? So next buttonhole, clip it down, push it back, off we go. Did you hear the click? That was making it go back up the other way. And then you can see when you get back to the start, because this foot moves, it hits this. And you can kind of see where you've started your zigzag off. So it does most of the hard work for you, which is why I insisted on getting a one-step buttonhole. Now, my embroidery machine does this like super automated, so I just hit go, but it does the whole thing. Oops, did it again. And you do the same thing for your cuffs and collars, but you make the buttonholes go sideways. So I'm making mine go down. If I was using smaller buttons and I wanted to, I could make the holes go across. It's entirely up to you. It's your look. I do it the way I like it because I like it, obviously. But yeah, if you were using smaller buttons, you could definitely do it the other way. Down, hits the end, you hear it click, and then it comes back up the side, and you can see when it gets back to the start. Lift it up, pull it out. I'll trim all the tails later. Under, push. Love buttonholes. I used to dread them, but one-step buttonholes are just fun. I know that's a weird thing to say and think, but they are. They're fun now. So this is the last one, so we may as well just record them all. I'm already here. So this machine is technically a mechanical machine because it's got no like buttons and stuff. But I insisted on getting a one-step buttonhole for this exact reason. And then we just come along and trim off all of this excess. Now there's a few ways that people rip open the buttonholes. The most common one is that they'll take a pin and put it at the end so that you can't go past it, and then shove your seam ripper in and just push it into the pin. I don't do seam rippers. Not my thing. So I'm going to take my craft knife and I'm going to hold it so that nothing's underneath it. And I'm just going to slot it into the center gently and work my way towards the end slowly. Right? So I'm just pushing down gently so that I'm using the full blade, and then my buttonhole is open. So that's how I do all of my buttonholes. I will need to come along and tidy up all the excess, but I'll do that in a minute. So again, I push it in at one end, and then slowly, as I get to that other end, I slow down and really make sure that I can see what I'm doing. Now you could still do this and put a pin in the end if you're worried about going past it. So we go in on an angle. I'm kind of holding this on an angle. I really hope that you can see what I'm doing. I can't really see the camera right now. So in, and then last one. Like that. So now if you wanted to trial it, you could take your button and push it. Now it'll be stiff the first few times, but you want it to be stiff. If it's too low straight up, your buttonhole will eventually get too big. But it does fit the buttonhole. It does fit the button. And this just, the one step just saves you having to measure it out. So that's that done. So now all I'm going to do, and this is literally how I do it, is I line everything up like this, and I'll just take my Chaco pen, once it's all lined up, and stick it in the hole and just draw the line, and then that's where I sew my button on. Oh, sorry, that was a squeaky noise. So you want to line it all up. So you just lay it as flat as you can, and obviously I can't do it well here. So you're just going to lay it so it lines up there. And you can even add some pins so that nothing's going to move. You line this up perfectly. Shove some pins in it like this. And then just grab the Chaco pen, stick it in the hole, and draw like that. And then see, there's the mark there. And so in the center of that mark is where I will stitch the button onto. Like that. So I'm going to go off camera and mark all of that and trim off all the tails, and then I will sew a button on for you so you can see how to sew a button. Alright, so I've sewed all but one button on so I can show you what to do. So I've just got my thread doubled over, and then I'm going to tie a knot in the end. Now the way I tie a knot is I make a loop, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds, and then pull the knot to the end like that. And then I can chop off, whoops, the tail. So the knot's now close to the end. Well, it's at the end because I've created it at the end. Then I'm going to take my button and hold it where it needs to be. So at the placement marks that I've made. And I'm going to come up from the bottom, and I want to get it through one of the buttonholes here. So I'm going to go up and then down through the other side. Like that, and then pull it tight, and then adjust the button so that the buttonholes are sitting where you want. Now mine only have 2 holes, so I'm only just going to have to go back and forth. But when it's got 4 holes, you've got the option to do 2 lines across, or you can do the crisscross. So that's just a design thing as well. So I'm just going to go up and then down probably 5 or 6 times with the double thread just to make sure that the button's not going to fall off. Now, digital machines can actually sew buttons on. And quite often if you read your manual, it will teach you how to sew buttons on with a zigzag. It just tells you like what width and everything to set the zigzag, and it will sew the buttons, because the buttonholes in all buttons are actually the same width apart. So the holes might be bigger or smaller, but from here to here is always the same size so that you can sew it on with a sewing machine. There's a useless piece of fact for you. So now that I've done that several times, I'm just going to come in and kind of grab a little bit. So I'm just going to go down and up with enough to make it firm, but not like a huge piece. And then this is how I tie off. So I'm going to push the needle almost to the end and then grab the tail and wrap it around 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to pull the thread down so it's close to the bottom of the needle, put my thumb on it, and just wiggle and pull that through. And what that does is that creates a knot right here at the base, and then you can just chop the excess off. And there's your button on. So this shirt is now finished. I'm going to go and take a pretty photo for the outside and then wrap it because it is a Christmas present. So I hope you try a shirt. They are awesome presents, and they're not super complicated. The hardest part, I think, is the sleeve, but you get better with practice, and I promise the whole holding it as a 3D object definitely helped me a lot. So until next time, guys, bye!